Welcome back. I'm playing Warhammer 40,000 Battlesector, and today I am going to continue on with our faction versus faction matchup. Thanks to everybody that's been giving me some suggestions for matchups that they're really struggling with. I'll continue to work on creating some of these faction versus faction videos for you. If there's a certain faction versus faction matchup that you're really struggling with that I haven't made a video for, just comment below somewhere on the series, and I write down, and those who have the most requests or been around with the channel for the longest, I tend to try to focus on those first, unless I'm working on another series, and then in which case I come back to it like I am with these. So sorry to the people who've been asking for this matchup. It did take me a little bit of time to come back and get it going. But first, if you're enjoying these videos, please give my channel a like and subscribe. Encouraging to post more content for you. So I am not at all surprised that people have been asking me for this faction versus faction matchup, because I think this is one of the hardest matchups that are in this game. And so even with a build that I can recommend, it's still going to be an uphill battle, because it really depends on the map and what you're going to do. So there's like a lot of if-then situations here, just because the Necrons have pretty much everything they need in their toolkit to be able to counter you really, really hard. And so that definitely feels really, really bad. So if you are struggling with this matchup, do not feel bad. This is a very, very hard matchup. So I think the general mechanic to be aware of on this matchup is you need to be able to take out both. You need to have an army that's well-rounded enough to be able to take out lots of infantry, which are then going to have reanimation protocols, while appreciating that you're going to need some armor. But your armor is going to be extremely vulnerable to most of the Necron units that are going to have very good high damage potential with armor piercing. And knowing that a pure infantry build is going to be an absolute nightmare, because so many of the Necron units, for not very expensive amount of resources, can get things like the Living Lightning, which will allow them to spread attacks across multiple units and allow them to completely devastate most of your infantry forces with very little effort. So, and they'll also likely set up some Overwatch situations, which can make it very hard for you to get units to actually be able to snipe out the units you need to take out that are most likely to be countering you. On top of that, if you don't kill the HQ commander for your opponent, he's going to be summoning upwards of 4 scarabs on you every turn, and that's going to be used to snipe out your HQ commander, assuming it's not the tank commander, because your, sergeant, your commissar, your castellan are all going to be extremely vulnerable to a scarab snipe, and you need to try to keep them alive to be able to use your command point abilities and buff your units if you're using any of those units to try to help yourself. Or you need to make sure that you stack the deck in your favor so you're able to get the kills that you need. If you're going to be in a real tight quarters, then you're going to want to use as many flamers as possible, because that's the best way that you can use to take out 2 to 3 Necron squads per turn. And then when they come back weakened, your other forces can then finish them off completely, or you just continue to focus fire down on the full squads to wipe out the units that you need to. If your opponent's bringing a bunch of Tomb Blades, you're going to want to make sure you focus those down right away, because they don't have any potential for reanimation, so you want to drop them. Same with the HQ commanders, you want to drop down those guys as fast as possible as well, because they have no chance to recover and you can get the kill. If there's an Annihilation Barge and it's next to a bunch of Necron units, make sure you can get the kill. It won't come back and it'll explode and do additional damage. So you really have to be very tactical on the situation. And if you're on a more open map, then you're going to want to have units that have a little more range. So, you may not want to have all your sponson weapons be heavy flamers. If you're not sure you're going to be able to get those tanks into heavy flamer range, you may want to do a longer range situation. Likewise, if it's a big open map, you may want to, instead of having all your sentinels have the heavy flamer, you may want to have some of them actually be a plasma cannon, because this is highly effective against dropping Necron units, because a lot of them have pretty decent armor, and you know, doing the 37 to 50 damage times 2 plus splash doing 50 to 70 damage, that's enough to really hurt Praetorians and Immortals, those even Lich Guards and things like that as well. So it allow, and any vehicles, heroes. So this is a matchup where that can become a very viable option. So you just have to build out your forces depending on, you know, the map situation. You know, if it's a big open map, maybe the Rogel Dorms would be a better unit to bring. If it's more tight quarters, maybe more of a Leman Russ could be an option, unless you wanted to bring out the Leman Russ Battle Cannon, because that'll give you a little more range, whereas the Demolisher wants to be at 3. So again, it all kind of depends on the match. So I'm just going to give you an example build of one for Siege Command Point, 2,000 points. That's going to have some cover, not be completely open. So hopefully this will help out. And then just be aware that you'll want to get as many buffs going to your units that you can, and then again trying to build up those command points, because if you can get up to 3 command points to be able to drop your death streak, that should annihilate tons of the Necron units to help you mop them up. Or if you're getting real close to winning on the strategic command points, using the Valkyrie transport to maybe try to outmaneuver the Necrons, or possibly drop a Commissar or an Ogryn, somebody that has some hard hitting damage behind enemy lines to snipe their commander if you don't have somebody else that can act as a sniper for you. So it all kind of depends on the situation, or if they're all grouped together, maybe you want to use a Valkyrie strafing run. So again, this is a real hard matchup for me to tell you exactly what to do, because there's so much variability in it, because it's just such a challenging matchup. It really leads to a lot of dynamic play depending on the match situation. So given that extreme examples here, the big thing is most of your opponents, if you're playing as Necrons, are going to likely have 2 Locust Heavy Destroyers, and you're going to want to make sure to kill those, because they're going to absolutely decimate your tanks and snipe out your heroes. And they're going to have the hover ability, which means they're going to be able to outrun a lot of your infantry, because you don't have any jetpack units to be able to catch up with them. They're likely going to have an Overlord, in which case you want to make sure you kill him very quickly so he's not summoning the Scarab Swarms. I do occasionally see opponents save up for 2 command points, in which case they'll use the Death Sight strafing run, and that can do damage to vehicles and your infantry. So it just depends on what they're trying to assassinate. I can't say I've ever had a Necron player use their tier 3 ability on me, because they're usually going to be spamming the Scarab Swarms. So just be aware of that. And then, like I said, a lot of times they'll like to use Tomb Blades with the Living Lightning, so therefore you don't want to have all your infantry there. And then they'll have Immortals, usually with Gauss Blasters, so they can do damage both to your infantry and your vehicles, so that can be very problematic. Occasionally they'll have a couple with Living Lightning. Rarely do I see anybody do a pure Living Lightning build. I do still see this is a matchup where the Necron Annihilation Barge can be pretty efficient, because it'll have its main armor piercing attack, and then it'll have the secondary Living Lightning attack every few turns. But you shouldn't have a ton of difficulty killing the Annihilation Barge, so just be aware of that. And then they likely will bring some sort of Praetorians to have some heavily armored melee units to lock your units down, so having units to be able to counter engage those, or make sure your vehicles don't get locked down too aggressively. And then once you get outside that, it's going to be a lot of RNG. How many times are they going to reanimate? How are you going to get your guys into position? Are you going to be able to kill those guys? The ones that are going to be hurting you the most, you know, it's a very difficult matchup. So for my example build here, I'm going to go with the Tank Commander, and I'm going to use just kind of the standard kit. The reason is a lot of my other units are going to have heavy flamers. So I have the Leman Russ Battle Cannon, so it has something that can shoot at an optimal range of 5, so it does have some range, and will be weakening guys down to help me finish off units with the flamers if they're going to be going against units that are going to have more armor like the Immortals, where a single attack of a Flamer is not going to be enough to squad wipe them. He'll have the las cannon every 2 turns to help him snipe down HQ commanders, vehicles, more heavily armored units. And then I just do the heavy bolter, because the heavy bolter itself can help me kill the units that reanimate, because that'll be more than enough to kill 2 models on most squads that reanimate, or drop the Locust Heavy Destroyer that may resurrect. Now, I like his abilities because he gives us 10% additional damage, and since I'm doing a Lehman Russ build, that can help synergize well. He also has the Pound Him to Dust ability, which gives you plus 100% extra shots with minus 10 accuracy. So this means it will double the shot. So if I was using the las cannon here, he'd attack with 2 shots of the las cannon instead of the 1. He would attack twice with the Lehman Russ battle cannon instead of 1. And then the sponson weapons would also attack twice as well. So this is where you can cause your flamers to do shit tons of damage, because now all of a sudden instead of 10 attacks you're doing 20 attacks, and that's enough to wipe out pretty much anything that you're trying to shoot that's not the most elite tiered armor. It's also what I really like to do if you're on a big open map is to do the Rogodorns, because the Oppressor Cannon has 6 optimal range. You can then drive this around to use the Pulverizer Cannon and then finish up with some heavy bolters and the heavy stubbers, and then you can usually get multiple attacks, because if you get enough kills you should be able to then surge and then have another round of double attacks minus your secondary weapons, because they will be on cooldown, but then you can get another 2 shots with your Oppressor Cannon. So if you're doing a big open map and you're doing the Rogodorn build, that will give you 4 attacks of the Oppressor Cannon 1 turn. So that can be absolutely amazing. But for us, we're going to try to do those double attacks with the Rogodorn instead. I do not recommend using the Blitz'em. I think this is a stupid ability. It could be good, but it should not take your action and another action. So effectively you're using 2 action points to get 1 melee attack. So it's just not a good situation. I tend to go with double Commissars. The reason being is they're actually very good in melee. They have a base damage of 82 to 110, and he does have 2 attacks. So if you were to put him in a Valkyrie and then drop him behind enemy lines, he would be able to snipe an enemy lord. But more importantly, he has the Execute ability, and this has been reworked since the original release. So I'll bring 2 Cadian Shock Troops, because he'll be able to shoot one of these guys in the head, and then anybody that's within 1 tile of the squad that's killed. So let's say I have vehicles all around here, and then I have the Cadians in this square here. I shoot them. Everybody around here is now going to be getting momentum. It'll be 30 momentum, and that 30 momentum lasts for 2 turns, except HQ commanders. So the Commissar himself will not get those momentum gains. The tank commander will not get the momentum gains. The sergeant doesn't get the momentum gains. The Castellan does not get the momentum gains. So the commander units do not get the gains. I just wanted to make that very, very clear. But your elite units certainly will. So I don't want you, so you'd want to make sure you're giving that to the Sentinels. The unit you execute yourself gets the momentum, and getting it to your Psychers or your Ogrins, your Kasserkin, all those, or if you're doing other vehicles, all those things would be able to get the 30 momentum. And the reason that's important is you're going to be trying to drive guys around to get lots of kills in order to build up momentum to get another round of attacks. Now, what I'd like to do is, with using the tank commander given the blitz, you can give that to the Punisher Lehman Russ battle tank here. So now it'll have 200 attacks instead of 100. It'll have 30 momentum, so you've already made it almost a third of the way through your getting to 100. And then with those 200 attacks with my other action point, I then use Show 'em Steel, which will now give you a 10% chance to crit. So now you're going to have at least 20 crits, assuming you're landing all of your attacks with this Punisher Gatling Cannon, and that should be enough to squad wipe anything that you're attacking or killing any commanders, anything like that. So that can be very, very powerful. Okay, and again, this is assuming you're going to be in a map that has some decent cover. You're not going to have a big open spot. If you are going to be in a big open spot, say like the I can't think of what it's called, the Sancrosate Chapel or whatever, which is the map that was released with the sisters, and especially if you're going to be on the defense on that elevated position, then you can make a solid argument to bring the Vanquisher out, because you get double attacks with that. That means you're doing 300 to 400 damage, assuming both those attacks land, and that means you should be able to kill any HQ commander that they could bring in one turn, and then you can just keep sniping high value targets. You know, if there's annihilation barges, if there's the Locust Heavy Destroyers, anything like that, you'll be doing amazing amounts of damage. But then after that, it's going to fall off, because then you're going to just be overkilling everything else, obviously, which feels bad. But trading one of your tanks to take out his high value targets, single targets, that would be a trade I'd make any day of the week. Likewise, if you don't like to do the Punisher Gatling Cannon, you can use some of these other loadouts, but I like it. The other main advantage that the Punisher Gatling Cannon has is if you're going to do Overwatch with it, when it overwatches, it'll overwatch with all 100 attacks. So what usually happens is when you're overwatching with any of these other weapons systems, it'll only attack for the base damage. It has no splash. But by having 100 attack, effectively you're getting splash damage with your Lehman Russ battle tank here, because it'll go through all 100 attacks, and so if it's wiping out one model, it'll jump to the next model to finish its 100 attacks, and it'll kill as many guys that are there. Now again, if you want to, because you'll have 20 points left over with this matchup, if you want to add some plasma cannons instead of the heavy bolter, it's kind of dealer's choice. I would not recommend the multi-melta, and you could make an argument for giving the heavy flamers, so when guys are counter jumping you and you'll want to be somewhat close to get to that optimal range, that maybe the flamer's a good chance here. But again, I tend to find that I like the heavy bolters to mop up the guys that are reanimated, assuming I'm not quite in position. I do like to do the Primaris Psyker, and there's several reasons actually. One, they're really good in melee, so if I do get counter jumped by the Praetorians and they're, you know, about to be dead or pretty weakened because I just flamed them, you run in there with the Force Stave here and you can squad wipe them with your double attacks. If you're trying to move your tanks into a position so you can guarantee a kill against the Locust Heavy Destroyer or the Overlord, and they have a bunch of Overwatch set up, which is typically the case, you put Night Shroud on whatever tank or unit you're using to move up to get the kill, and this will make them immune to Overwatch, so they can just literally walk right through all those units that are Overwatching and then attack. So let's say there's a bunch of Immortals or something that are in the way, you know, you just run in there with maybe a Sentinel and you just flame them all down and get a bunch of kills, and then mop them up with the rest of your units. Or literally, if you're sniping the leader or the Locust Heavy Destroyer, you just move through and then you kill them before they even get any attacks off, and that's very worth it. Plus it also gives you additional buffs where you'll get 20 evasion. Now for a tank itself, that means it's going to be net 0, so that's still not great, but it's better than -20, so at least they'll have to be somewhat in optimal position if they want to land all their attacks on you. Importantly, once you've used that Night Shroud, then the following turn you may want to use your mental shackles here, so that way you can reduce the accuracy of units. So let's say the Locust Heavy Destroyer, if you've now got it into range and you don't want it to move away and you don't want it to be able to hit you as much, then you give them a 30% accuracy debuff, and you also take away 2 of their movement. And if you're getting counter jumped, then you plop down the Psychic Maelstrom. Now all of a sudden you're doing 30 damage to any units that are within that effect, and then if they start the turn in the effect, they also suffer some movement penalties. So this can be real nice, especially if there's some choke points, to really harass the Necrons, because while some of their units have exceptional mobility, you know, the Immortals, the Necron Warriors, they don't have as much mobility, and that can really be an issue with them, especially if they don't have the Overlord nearby giving them bonus movement. So this can be very, very helpful for you. The big thing I would just mention, though, and to be warned, is I find that the empowered Psychic Maelstrom bugs out tons of times on online matches. So probably don't, if you're going to use the empowered ability, use the empowered Night Shroud or the mental shackles, not the Psychic Maelstrom, which is really unfortunate because it actually does shit tons of damage when it's empowered, but I just find that it bugs out greater than 50% of the time when I use it. So I don't recommend it on the online matches. It's fine on single player, but on the multiplayer, for whatever reason, it just does not like that ability. Going back to the Lehman Russes here, again, the Demolisher Cannon is really good against Necrons because it has all that splash damage. So if you can get to those optimal ranges, then just running over here, you can one-shot Immortals, the Flayed ones. It can do enough damage to the Tomb Guards and things like that. It can take I mean, it's a very good weapon, but the problem is at the optimal range of 3, driving your tank over there to get close enough can really get it killed. But if you're going to try to do that optimal range of 3, then again, having the plasma cannon loadout may be good, or just continuing on with the heavy bolter. You just have to decide what you want to do. I think this is one of the matchups where you can make a pretty strong argument for the plasma cannons. If you're going to do a all flamer sentinel build, then you probably want to do some plasma cannons as the Lehman Russ, just to help you weaken down the stronger forces. And then the Lehman Russ battle cannon, again, if it's more of an open map and you need to have a little more range, then using the Lehman Russ battle cannon, that is an option. I'm not a huge fan of it. I tend to find that it misses more than I would expect it to with its accuracy, but that is a viable option as well. And then I like to do more of the Lehman Russes because every 2 turns I then have this last cannon to snipe down their HQ commanders. And then because there's going to be so much infantry, I tend to just go with 4 armored sentinels with heavy flamers. I can run them all around the map. They can take out the infantry, and then once I've locked down areas, I can just leave these guys positioned on the strategic command point, and then they can drop unlimited amount of scarabs on these guys, and they're not going to be able to capture it back. Once you kill the HQ commanders and they can no longer use the scarab swarms, then these guys continue to move around the map and harass the units and get kills and take out infantry for you. But if you, for whatever reason, can't close the distance and snipe out the enemy lord, or he's being a very cagey person and just being in the way back that you're never going to reach him, then just dropping these guys on the strategic command point can be very good. And they also have 5 movement, so if you have other forces that are nearby, they're dropping scarabs on you, then you just move a little bit, flame them down, and then move them back onto the point. So that works out very well. And then I tend to do 2 Cadian shock troops, so I have enough troops to be able to run around and shoot them, to be able to execute them to get the momentum gains, because you want to do that 2 or 3 times throughout a match. And then also, if I need to have somebody soak up Overwatch, these guys are excellent at soaking up the Overwatch, because they can have, by having 10 models, they can take a lot of shots, and especially if they are the Gauss heavy blasters, the Locust heavy destroyers, they'll just overkill all these models, and that'll waste a lot of attacks. And then they also have access to frag grenades, which should allow them to single-handedly squad wipe Scarab Swarm every 2 turns while they're attacking, so that can be very helpful for you. Different alternative units to use would be the Castellan. Some people do like to use the Castellan. The main advantage of her is on the first turn you can use move, move, move. So if you're doing a Chimera build and you have the Commissars, this will allow you, with the increased movement, to potentially capture strategic command points that the Astra Militarum cannot otherwise get to without having a jump infantry, because they don't have access to that. So this will allow you to capture points on like the Imperial Ruins, that corner point at the elevated position, or ones that are a little bit further out, like at 8 or 9 movement, because you'll have the increased movement with the Chimera and with the Commissar here. And so by getting the move on both of those units, loading them up and then driving them over, they can cross that distance and capture that point on the very first turn. The other thing is, if you're doing the tank build, her ability gives you just 10 accuracy, so if you're really attacking from range, that could be very helpful for you. And then if those Praetorians do counter jump you, you can use Bring It Down to lower their armor and evasion, allowing your flamers to do more damage to them, because they actually normally are very hard to kill with flamers. Likewise with Lich Guard as well, so that can be very, very helpful. And then she's also no slough in combat. If you're going to use her as an assassin, getting the power fist to be able to punch guys down. Most people will usually just give her the power sword instead, but that is an option. Another unit that's a potential option is the Ogrins. Now, I personally do not like to use the Ogrins on this matchup because no matter what weapon type the Necrons bring out, they're going to be good against the Ogrins. They don't have enough armor to be able to tank the shots from Living Lightning. They don't have enough HP to be able to take the hits from real high damage output units either. But their Ripper guns are very good at doing splash damage, so they can do decent damage against most of the infantry units, and then their Ripper bayonets do have decent enough damage to allow them to take out high value targets in melee and then have a zone of control. I do not find that this wall of muscle is sufficient, so hopefully that'll change over time, because I get what they're trying to go for, but it just does not work out. And then they do have the powerful charge ability here, so that will allow you to almost squad wipe Immortals or the Warriors and then charge through additional units as well to do some splash damage, doing 15 to 20. So that is how you can get these guys to really charge through and do some good damage. If you're on a big open map, then using the Kasserkin can be an option. You know, the Overcharged Salvo will give you some more armor piercing. So if you add that in addition to the Bring It Down ability, that can be absolutely devastating to kill Necron units. But then you're going to have the Overeated trait that'll give you 20% less shots for 3 turns, which just feels bad. And then if you have the Melt of Mines deployed, that will do some substantial damage to any Necron units that are trying to capture the strategic command points or trying to attack your units. You can be a little bit strategic with where to deploy those, and that can work out quite well for you. And it does have some decent enough splash that it can really harm a lot of those Necron units, so that's an option. Like we talked about, if you're on a big open map, I think the Rogodoran can be a good option. I personally do not bring the Basilisk, but some people do like to bring this against the Necrons, because you have the Barrage ability, which can be very good at taking out units that are all grouped together, which the Necrons frequently will be, since they're trying to use the Overlord to give them the increased movement and the armor piercing. So getting 3 attacks in 1 turn can be very helpful. Plus they have access to the ingrained position, giving you additional accuracy. And then if they stop moving, they can get if they're not moving, you get the ingrained precision to help you increase your accuracy further. And then you can even boost it even further by sacrificing your movement to give you plus accuracy per movement. So that can give you a guaranteed hit with your cannon, just about, assuming you're attacking something that's not at absolute ludicrous ranges. Another good alternative, again, if you're going to do the Castellan, then I think doing a Chimera build would make a lot of sense. I really like to do just the standard Chimera build, so that way I have another heavy flamer, and then the multi-laser does pretty substantial damage. It really hits more than what you would think it would, with armor piercing a 2 against Necron units, and then it'll allow you to capture those points if you're doing the move ability like we talked about. If they ever go back to fixing the melee Chimera, because they broke it with the patch, it is nice that they have the Run It Over ability, which gives you a charge. But in the past they used to also give you the Dozer Blade attack, but that sense is bugged out, so it's no longer a thing. It just is what the Run 'em Over does effectively. But in the past, if you had somebody that was in melee range with you, you could then select the Dozer Blade attack, which would give you 1 attack doing 22 to 30 damage with 9 splash damage, and that would allow you to take out any Scarab Swarms or even do pretty decent damage against any melee units, so that could be very helpful for you. But since that's been bugged out, that makes this a much less attractive option. I tend not to use, I recommend not bringing the heavy weapons squad. Theoretically, they should be good with a big open map, because you could just deploy them down. You could use the missile launchers to take out the infantry. If anybody got too close, your autocannons could do damage against the medium tier infantry, and then you could use these guys to snipe down your high value targets. But with -10 evasion, they don't have a ton of HP. All the Necron units should be able to kill these guys pretty easily, so I do not recommend that you bring these guys out. And then I also recommend that you don't bring out the Sergeant, because he's just so easy to kill. The only time I could conceive of bringing a Sergeant out is if you're going to try to do a command... I can't talk. If you're going to try to do the Death Mark or the Death Strike missile build, in which case you would bring a lot of lower tier infantry, let them get killed, and then you drop a Death Streak missile on the rest of their units to wipe them out. But on a strategic command point where they're not all going to be together because they're going to be trying to capture points, that's not going to be highly effective. But for 80 points, if you want to just literally keep somebody in the way back part of the map that can just hide out and then collect those points out of range of most other attacks, then that is an option. But again, I don't recommend against doing an infantry build against the Necrons. So having a unit that's going to just buff up your infantry units, it doesn't make any sense to bring this guy. And then he's obviously super easy to kill from afar and snipe him down, so I don't think it makes any sense. So I hope that will give you some success. Please do not be frustrated or disheartened if you are losing this matchup frequently, because most players do, because it's very, very difficult. Not having a good durable tank unit like a Bolgrin is extremely detrimental to the Astra Militarum, and then by them deciding to go more with a highly variable weapon kits for the tanks instead of a highly variable infantry loadout, that really limits what you can do against a faction that's really good against killing low armored units. So, and then they also excel at killing very heavily armored units, so it just puts you in a bad way that you just don't have quite the right balance of units to overcome the situation. Now, the only other thing I wanted to mention is the Commissar here. I did not specifically mention this, but with his ability here with the battle lines, remember you want to keep your guys in battle lines, but you may not want to have all your guys in the same battle line. You know, having the tank commander here giving the shock and awe doctrine, if you're going to do the Punisher build, yes, that'll give you some increased damage with the las cannon, but if you're doing a heavy bolter and Punisher Gatling cannon, that extra damage is not going to come out to do very much, whereas the voice of command will have a huge benefit to that, because all of a sudden you're going to be increasing it by 10 to 20% with the +1 damage to those Punishers, and then that accuracy to help you attack from suboptimal ranges. Whereas if you're going to be using the Oppressor Cannon or the Vanquisher Cannon or the Demolisher Cannon or even the Lehman Russ Battle Cannon that has higher damage output, or the Plasma Cannons, then using the Tank Commander Shock and Awe is going to be much more beneficial. So in those situations where you're going to be using the Punisher and not those other loadouts, it actually may make more sense for you to want to use the Commissar's Battle Line Doctrine, because that'll give you plus 25% momentum gains, and more importantly, it'll give you plus 10 bonus health. So for your tanks, that means you're going to be getting 40 extra health. So to get multiple battle line doctrines going, you just need to make sure your two battle lines aren't touching. That way, because if they're all in cohesion, meaning one unit is touching the whole battle line, then whoever is the highest ranking officer, that battle doctrine is going to be applied. And so the order of ranking is the number 1 is the Castellan, number 2 is the tank commander, number 3 is the commissar, and then finally the sergeant. So, but if you have, you know, one group over here, one group not touching over here, you have the commissar here, that one's getting it, and the other one's getting the tank commander or the Castellan. So you just got to select which one you're going to be choosing to help with those battle line doctrines. And then in the past, I used to like using the multi-laser here, but with the rework here, I really don't like what they did with the harassing fire change, so I don't use that anymore. So good luck, guys. I really hope this helps. Like I said, big uphill battle, very, very challenging matchup, and the best way to not lose is try not to select this matchup if you can avoid it, because it's definitely not going to be in your favor. But if you really want a big challenge, then by all means have fun and see what you can do, but do not get disheartened. So with that, I'm going to sign off for the day. I hope you're enjoying these videos. If you are, please give my channel a like and subscribe to encourage me to post more content for you. Have a great day.